Welcome back to the Unbroken Arrows podcast, Healing Through the Hunt. And we have a special guest with us right now, Ryan Callaghan. If you're familiar with Meateater, the Meateater series, the Meateater family of podcasts, and of course Meateater Trivia, Ryan is part of the Meateater crew. He is the Director of Conservation for Meateater and also is the host of the podcast, Cal's Week in Review. So Cal, welcome. Thank you for being part of this show.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate it. Here at Pheasant Fest this weekend, you're here in a role of a moderator for a couple of different panel discussions, if that's accurate.
Yeah, that's accurate. Bob St. Pierre is the head of comms here at Pheasant PFQF.
That's easier, right?
Yeah,
that's exactly.
Bob's a buddy of mine, and when he first asked me to come out and talk or do something at Pheasant Fest a few years ago, I just said, I look at these as my time to volunteer, so just treat me like a volunteer. So we don't really talk about strategy or anything like that ahead of time. Sure. He just literally sends me an itinerary of where to be and what to do.
Right.
And so I try to, everybody's got excuses for not volunteering. So I try to take advantage of these weekends at stuff like this to get my volunteer hours in. So,
sure.
So moderating, just like facilitating conversations on a couple of different topics. We just did one on public land, bird hunting, tips, tactics, with the editor of Pheasants Forever magazine, Quail Forever magazine, and Gun Dog magazine.
Okay.
And then also the PATH program.
Sure. That's one of the questions that I wanted to ask you about. That's a South Dakota program. Stands for Public Access to Habitat. And what can you tell us about that, and what types of conversations have you had or led in these panel discussions?
Well, PATH is an exciting program because it's new. It's definitely a version of something that everybody should be familiar with, which is a public access to private land program, such as WEHA in Kansas, Block Management in Montana, CREP here would be a state-administered program in South Dakota.
In Nebraska, I do believe they have a walk-in program as well.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm from. We're originally from is in Nebraska.
And Nebraska is a fantastic example. Not that much public land.
Correct.
In the state of Nebraska. So if you take away a program like a walk-in public access to private ground program, you're really, really limiting hunting in general in that state for a lot of people. So,
right.
And so that's why PATH exists. It's another option, another tool in the tool belt for landowners to allow for public access. If that CREP program doesn't quite fit their needs, this is another option.
Sure.
And honestly, sharing land across the aisle from you, Doug's program, would be another option out there too. So different avenues for providing that public access to private property.
Sure. And that is something you talk about Nebraska having a lower number of number of acres of public access. And, being born and raised in the northeastern part of the state, hunting, fishing, and farm ponds, access to those, it's nice that, you know the families, those types of things. But those things are changing because of how the land is purchased now. Larger maybe corporations are buying up more land, so that access is decreasing. So these programs, I think, are very, very important no matter what state we're talking about.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if we know, it's not a fun thing to talk about, but we know this traditional family farm, family ranch, that, as time goes on, that ownership changes or that management strategy changes. Every time that change occurs, we stand to lose some sort of
access.
Right.
And when access goes away, hunter numbers go away as well. So, so it could be a corporation that comes in to make a purchase. A good buddy of mine who's a farmer in the Sacramento Valley, his next door neighbor is a hedge fund.
Okay.
Right, and it's part of their portfolio, and it's it's a hedge fund with a B behind it, so billions of dollars of capital.
Right.
Farmers can't compete with that. Right. So then we're also just seeing like the fragmentation of these operations by recreational property owners who are absentee, and they expect to show up and have everything kind of perfect.
Right.
And so public access often isn't a part of their management program, right? So,
Sure.
That's why PATH is exciting, because Aberdeen, South Dakota has gone through this cycle that we're talking about, which is pheasant hunting was the thing in Aberdeen, and everyone was behind it. They had lots of people traveling to that area for pheasant hunting. Not a ton of dedicated public land, some,
Right.
but it was this time before that we were talking about where it was just easy to knock on a door and get access.
Right.
As these times have changed, people are worried about liability, invasive grasses, all sorts of worries, legitimate worries.
Right.
Those acres started getting closed off, or larger outfitting operations that were designed to hold people on that property. So when people come into that property, they spend all their money there.
Right.
They're not going into town for shotgun shells or licenses even.
Right. Breakfast or evening
dinner, cocktails,
beverages,
whatever. Yeah. So, the downtown core of Aberdeen was on the decline. And it's harder to bring in new business. It's harder to recruit people for your business.
Sure.
When they show up and they see like, well, shoot, half of Main Street's boarded up.
Right.
Do I really want to bring the family here?
Right.
And so they paid for an economic analysis. What the heck's going on? There was a strong economic science behind the fact that there was a big revitalization bump back in the prime days of pheasant hunting. And so the city of Aberdeen, along with Pheasants Forever, got together to explore what they could do. Like if they could provide more public access to these places that don't have the infrastructure.
Right.
People are going to stay in town. They're going to spend money in town and travel out to these places that are in what's now the PATH program.
Right.
So give them a place to hunt. They're going to show up and hunt and spend money in town.
Right.
Yeah, and then
it's a good plan.
It is.
It really is.
Yeah, and it's right. I mean, we know that exists. We know that that's proven out.
Right.
And so it's kind of interesting to see this like full circle on a relatively small scale. This little example of Aberdeen, South Dakota.
The thing that comes to my mind when we're talking about this is, it's different. There's nothing wrong with people that own their land. They can say yes or no. They can a farmer can sell his land to whomever he wants. It's just different. It's not wrong. The public access.
Individual property rights are what this nation is founded on.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what I'm trying to struggle to say, I guess, is the change. Everything changes, and that's just one of the things. When I was a kid, all you had to do, like you said, knock on somebody's door, and it was a yes or no. And most of the times it was a yes. And now it's different. It's just the way it is, I guess. Now the PATH program, I think, probably has some similarities and some commonalities between your land access initiative that I think you oversee at Meateater.
Yeah.
Well, working specifically with Pheasants Forever, we use the Build a Wildlife Area program, BAWA,
Okay.
for our last land access initiative. Kind of sound like government now with all the acronyms, but
Right.
But very similar in the fact that what we're trying to do is create access. And we have a very simple mission statement on our land access initiative, which is provide more access to hunting and fishing. So some of these spots, these programs may be relatively small, but at the end of the day, it's additive, and that's what we're trying to do. So
Sure.
The last one is like unbelievable property called Wildcat Bend. It's on the lower Yellowstone, Montana.
In Montana, okay.
Working with Hunter Van Donsel here at PF. It's like you guys gotta look at this. It was on my desk for a year.
Okay.
And got out there, did site visits, listened to the other folks involved, the Lower Yellowstone Coalition, which is an economic driven group, right? Of like, we know the Lower Yellowstone's fantastic. There's a lot of these farm communities that are very similar to Aberdeen, where there used to be a grocery store, there used to be,
Right.
Things there that supported the local economy. Why is that not the case now, right? So you had that, the parts shop was in town, the grocery store was in town, you didn't have to drive all the way into Billings. Right, and that's the Aberdeen model too, is like all these, they were able to successfully solicit ranchers in the beginning, because it's like, hey, we know that you come into town once a month, you have a dinner on Sunday, you get your grocery shopping done, you ship stuff at the FedEx store. If we don't do something here,
Those things are going to be gone.
those things are going to be gone,
Right.
and you're going to have to drive, all the way into Brookings, or right, because it's like those drive times just keep getting longer.
Getting
The
longer.
supply lines keep getting longer.
Right.
So this Wildcat Bend deal, that's why the Lower Yellowstone Coalition exists too, is to try to find some revitalization opportunity. Recreation in Montana is huge. Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, they actually found this landowner, worked with Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever to help negotiate the purchase of that land and the holding of that land. Because, state government is a multi-step process where Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks identified the property. They can't hold the property. It has to go through a land board. It has to be signed off by the governor to acquire new land.
The steps, there are so many steps
There's so
to
many
that
steps.
process.
And you have an individual property owner who wants to do the right thing.
That.
You're like, he's like, oh, I love this place. That's why I built my place out here.
Right.
I want to see it go to people who want to appreciate it the way that I did.
Right.
And so was very patient, went through this process. Pheasants Forever came in, handled the land part of it, had kind of the sweaty, nail-biting scenario of hoping the land board
Was going to approve it.
was going to approve it, hoping the governor is still going to approve it. And then we were able to come in, kind of raise this awareness piece, get folks involved, and write some good letters to the land board.
Sure.
Write some good letters to the governor, and then do this fundraising, and that was all through the land access initiative. So we tried to raise $30,000, and we ended up with 150.
Oh, wow.
So
Nice.
yeah.
Nice. Now, is there no project, say, too big or too small for your land access initiative?
My preference would be to come in and find the smaller ones that they might get a little overlooked because they're not as sexy as the big ones.
Right.
But they need to get done, and again, it's still additive. But the next one that we're gonna fund through land access is Corner Crossing. So
It's been an issue that I've listened to quite often on the podcast. So,
and it's certainly from my perspective, very cut and dry thing when we're specifically talking about these corner locked pieces where the difference between access and no access is a footstep.
Right.
There's
and the debates over the air above it sometimes too, right?
Exactly. And even if that debate were valid, it's still a zero impact type of thing.
Right.
But that's the difference between 6 million acres in Wyoming, right?
Wow, 6 million.
Yeah, another 2 million in Montana.
Wow.
And that's stuff that we're paying taxes on and is part of that public domain.
Sure.
And we need to start getting in there, managing that stuff, providing that access as an option.
Right.
So in these areas that are seeing increased public land pressure, we have more places to go, more places to spread out that pressure, keep providing good opportunities, so we keep hunters engaged, right? So the only people that are going to effectively fight for hunters are hunters.
Right.
And I'm sure you guys have seen it when you talk to, I guarantee there's unfortunately people in this room who are like, oh, it's not even worth going out there anymore.
Right.
Right?
And we don't want that. We don't want them to have that mentality. We want them to be able to enjoy it. So.
Enjoy it and be able to make sure other people find that enjoyment as well. Mm-hmm. So they're willing to lobby for this stuff.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Now, I've got one watching and listening to you guys on TV and your podcasts and that land access initiative. One was floating around in my head with regard to Nebraska, and I'm just wondering if this is something that fits into that. But I'm from northeast Nebraska, so the county borders the Missouri River across to South Dakota. There is a town called Niobrara. It's got an interesting history because the entire town, because of rising levels of groundwater, moved from basically the floodplain for which it was on up the hill, the entire town. It's an interesting story. But boat access to the Missouri River there is very limited. So if somebody was interested in getting involved and maybe submitting a question with something like that first, is that a project that would be even considered by the Land Access Initiative?
You give me a 20-foot wide strip that you could back a boat down.
That's what I'm talking about.
Access to the Missouri River.
Right.
That's a lot of access, right? So I'd be very interested in that.
Okay. So then, how if that's the case, then how does somebody go about communicating with you about getting that as a consideration?
Let's say that you're somebody listening and you want to submit a property, and that's the only holdup is because of the size of my show that I'm running. Mm-hmm. We need something physical to start with. So go to the Meateater.com land access page, or you can write into Ask Cal at the Meateater.com.
Okay.
But there's a land access email. You can submit the property there. Mm-hmm. But that's really what we need to start is a physical location that says this property is a landlocked, or is a piece that would provide the access that we need.
Sure. Okay.
Whether it's for sale or not for sale, but I did a lot of due diligence last year and the year before on it. Unfortunately, like a bunch of chunks of ground that nobody called me back on, trying to see what the possibility would be to get in there, provide an easement, or that's like just a tool that is amazingly effective. Is that that land can stay in the family property. We can just pay for an easement across it, right, and provide that access. So, as just one available tool in the toolbox, and in order to do that, we would work with a PFQF, a land trust, And there's some folks here at Pheasants Forever that wrote in to me because they didn't have that good customer service experience with a nonprofit they tried to reach out to, and they just wouldn't. It's unfortunate that if you don't speak some of the language, it's hard to get your message across on what you want to do.
Right.
And so I've been able to kind of facilitate some of those conversations by going like, oh, okay, I understand what you want to do with your endowment that you want to create.
Right.
Or you're setting yourself up to leave a bunch of land behind and you want it to go to a good use. This is the person that you need to talk to.
Sure.
And so it's not something that I quantify work-wise, but I'm more than happy to help connect the dots with people too, because it's doing the same thing. It's adding more.
Sure. My wife and I are avid listeners of the Meateater podcast and trivia, and we will compete against ourselves, during trips and in the car and so forth. And oftentimes, I think when you have won on the trivia, they have the $500 going to a conservation organization, and I think you have donated to the Land Access Initiative, and other people have as well. So what if a listener that happens to have some money that they would like to donate or put towards that, can a person do that as well?
Yes. It's a little tricky because, we are not a nonprofit.
Okay.
Right. So it's we're working on making it a little bit more seamless. But yes, you can make a donation to Land Access Initiative. You can do that on that Land Access page. You can do that at Roundup. When you round up, you have the option to round up at checkout through any one of our businesses.
Okay.
And then we will be launching another round of the Auction House of Oddities. So you can make a donation and get something fun and weird and cool through the Auction House of Oddities too. So,
Right. So there are ways to do that.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Well, I know you're a busy man and you've got a schedule to keep, so I appreciate you stopping by. There are several other things I wanted to maybe talk to you about. Your Cal's Week in Review is an interesting podcast, and those issues that you cover and talk about are a lot of things that people need to keep in the front of their mind, not in the back of their mind.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there'd be ever a time where we might be able to arrange a few minutes again via telephone to visit. And I also think that in your experiences, you might have come across people that might fit into being guests in our podcast with regard to our Healing Through the Hunt. Our whole objective is to try to help others use the outdoors for healing and to get re-engaged or continue to be active in the outdoors. So if that's ever a situation, if you come across somebody that says, hey, I know these people that would appreciate your story, so we'd appreciate you to pass that along.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, there's a lot of overlap there.
Yeah,
for sure. So, yeah.
Well, thank you again. Appreciate it. On behalf of Trey and me and Catherine, I would like to have you get introduced to my co-host, Catherine, my stepdaughter. She's a great kid and a very avid hunter. So I'd like you to meet her sometime too, if possible. So.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Look forward to it. Yeah, thank you very much.
You bet. Thanks, Cal.